let's get into this dog, man. So you go to Nepal, you climb in the Himalayas, you've done crazy stuff, and at one point you had a dog come along for the ride. And so walk us through how that started.
Yeah, I was leading a group of climbers in Nepal last year, and we were doing a kind of a warm up mountain in preparation for a taller, more challenging mountain called Barunsi. But the first peak we did is called Mira Peak, which by Himalayan standards is relatively small. It's a little bit over 21,000 feet, which is still taller than the highest peaks that we have here in North or South America. But on the way down from this climb, we packed up our high camp and we're walking down a glacier, and all of our climbers are wearing their $1,000 boots and their expedition jackets and parkas and things, or roped up on a glacier. And past all these climbers runs this little stray dog that I'd seen from the town of Kare a couple days prior. And she came up the glacier past all the climbers and ropes and met us at about 17,500 feet. And she was a really sweet dog. I gave her a little piece of beef jerky, and she ended up following us for the next 3 weeks for the rest of our expedition, and followed us to Barunsi Base Camp. And long story short, she eventually followed us all the way to the summit of Barunsi, which is a very challenging mountain that has over 5,000 feet of rope that we put up just to allow access for the climbers to get there safely. And she went up and beat me to the summit, which is the highest that any dog has climbed anywhere in the world.
So that's a very, very distilled version of what really happened with that dog. So when you say 5,000 feet of rope, like explain that, because what this dog is doing, so you kind of alluded to the gear that we need to, and by we, I mean people way more, what you need. But this dog had nothing. And so explain what you have to do to get to that summit, and then it'll kind of frame up how a dog just runs ahead of you and does it.
Yeah, it was just completely out of place. For the climbers on this trip, they had trained for literally years prior. This is not a beginner's climb. This is not something that people do as their first climb or even their second or third or 10th climb. People train for years and years and climb progressively more challenging peaks to be there. They all came in from countries all over the world with, 100 pounds of equipment and clothing, the best gear, materials that are known to man. When I do an expedition, I'm probably, rolling in with $8,000 or $10,000 worth of equipment. And this is all stuff that is designed to make extreme conditions a little more hospitable for the climber. So we're wearing these huge Arctic mittens and, wearing, boots that are like ski boots, but then another layer on top of that. It's very, very challenging conditions. We had temperatures there that, wind chill would be negative 20 degrees, negative 30 degrees. And then on top of that, we're doing a technical climb. So we're not just walking up a mellow ski slope. There's sections of rock climbing that were vertical. There's sections of snow and ice that were actually, vertical or past vertical, actually overhanging. And at that point, when I did this climb after 16 years of climbing, it was probably one of the more challenging mountains I've done, top 2 or 3 for sure. So for us as climbers, with all of this equipment and preparation and knowledge, to have a dog follow us along with nothing, it's not like we did the expedition with the expectation of having this dog there. If we had, maybe we would have brought equipment for the dog, but she went up just with the fur on her back and her bare feet and did something that the vast majority of climbers couldn't do, let alone, most people in general.
So 2 things. What's the first thought that goes through your mind when you see that dog up there? Are you like, well, this dog's going to die? Or are you just like, oh, this is kind of an anomaly? I mean, what's going through your head when you see it?
At first, when we saw on the glacier, that was kind of mellow terrain as we were coming down that easier mountain. And then the next few days was, just hiking along a trail for 3 or 4 days to the next mountain. And I was very, very pleased. I'm a huge dog person. And the most challenging part of this job for me is leaving my dog and my wife for weeks or months at a time. And so to have a companion like that on the trail was great for me. I mean, it's therapeutic. The first day she followed me around, she slept outside my tent in the morning. She was just outside and had a little layer of snow on her where it had snowed the night before. But I couldn't get her to come in that night. And then after the snow, she slept in my tent with me every night, and I shared my food with her. So that I really enjoyed having the companionship. On this particular expedition, I was the only Western guide on the trip. So I didn't have any coworkers. There's Sherpa there and clients, but it's nice to have somebody to be in a tent with you at night. So that was great. That said, as we got to Baransi and established our base camp and we progressively go higher and come back down as we acclimatize to let our bodies get used to that elevation. So it was kind of cool. It was cute when she followed us at first, and then we came to base camp. And as we get into the more challenging terrain, I definitely, had concern for her. And when we eventually went for our summit push, I actually tied her up in base camp and gave instructions to the locals who were there to how to take care of her and feed her while we were gone. Because where we were going, I really didn't think that she could make it. And even if she could physically do it, just the conditions there were so extreme that I didn't know if she'd be able to survive that. And so I tried to keep her in camp. I really did. And she apparently broke free or chewed through whatever tether she had and met up with us on the first day and then followed us for the next several days to the top. But yeah, I was very concerned for her. I just couldn't stop her. I certainly wasn't encouraging her.
She was not going to leave her supply of beef jerky behind, huh?
I guess not. Yeah, our cook was in base camp. She could have stayed there and had better food, but she had some very, I don't know what it was, some just impressive drive to stay with us. I have no idea why.
Do you have a theory? Do you have a theory why she kind of took to you so hard?
I really think that dogs possess and display, pretty high range of emotion and emotional intelligence. And I think that sometimes animals do what they need to do to get by, seeking food, water, shelter. And I do think that some dogs are certainly people pleasers. You see that with, dogs in my experience growing up, hunting dogs and things like that they want to make the people around them happy. They have that drive. And I think that was the case here. I think that she saw my attachment to her, that she liked my companionship, and I treated her well. And I think she just wanted to stay near us. Dogs in Nepal in general aren't treated super well. Rabies is still very, very common there.
Yeah.
And so some of the locals, even from a very young age, are kind of taught to shoo away dogs or to kick them away, and they're not always treated especially well. And so I think when this particular animal had somebody that, just kind to her, would pet her, keep her warm, give her a little bit of food, I think that she really appreciated that. So I'm sure that was partly a motivation. But if all she wanted was food and water, she could have stayed at 24 other places along the way and been perfectly happy.
Yeah, she wanted more than that. And what I keep thinking about that, you try to be careful not reading too much into what they do, but at the same time that, they're pack animals, and that dog, met up with you. And that's, a lot of the really good trainers that we work with who, they're positive trainers, they're praise and encouragement, confidence builders, their training programs are structured around that pack mentality. And that dog wants to be with part of its pack, and they don't, modern dogs don't seem to differentiate between other dogs and humans. We're all just buddies or enemies or whatever. And that dog, maybe that dog was mistreated a little bit, and then found somebody who treated her well, and she's like, man, this is my pack. Like, we're doing this together. And then, to try to keep her in camp. And didn't she at one point chew through her leash to make sure she got to you guys?
Yeah. When we left for our final push to go toward the summit, she broke free of her restraint and followed us up. I was particularly concerned with her on that last push because prior to that, our Sherpa had gone up to establish some camps, and we went up, set up camp. And when the Sherpa came back down, she wouldn't follow him back down. She stayed in camp. And this is over 20,000 feet on a glacier. We had 40-mile-an-hour winds, and she stayed outside alone for 2 nights up there. And I have no idea why. There wasn't anybody there. There's no food there. There's no reason for her to be there. But she stayed up high on the mountain. The next time the Sherpa went up to finish setting the ropes to the summit, I was very concerned that she would even be alive. You know, I gave him a little bit of food and said, please, if you see the dog, give her some food. Bring her back down if you can. But I mean, this is breaking my heart that this dog is, you know, just alone up there. And when they got to her, she said, she's fine. She won't go back down. They followed her up almost to the summit of the mountain, fixing all the ropes, and then followed them all the way back down. And then the following day is when we went for the summit. So she'd almost summited the mountain the day before, come down. I tried to tie her up in camp so she wouldn't have to go through that experience again. And she just refused to not climb that mountain. And the trust that she had in me and the Sherpa was just unbelievable. You know, I work with some of my clients for, you know, days on climbs, or in some cases years over a period of climb, to develop a level of trust, you know, so they can relax and just, you know, come down a slope and know that I've got them. And this dog would climb without a rope on really scary terrain. If I was there, if I was below her, she would climb, or she would wait on me. There's a couple of circumstances where she actually got on some ice and slipped and would have fallen a good 600 to 800 feet before she stopped, and I was able to catch her. But what was going through her mind that would motivate her to try and get up things that were that scary, that dangerous, just absolutely blows me away. She's an incredible animal.
Man, so how did she navigate? I'm trying to just imagine it. You know, you talked about like beyond vertical, and, you know, you guys are using ropes. How does she navigate that stuff? I mean, how does she navigate a cliff?
Some of it on rock, she was impressive, honestly. She would scamper up stuff that, you know, is kind of like low range technical climbing for humans. And what she could grip with her claws was just absolutely incredible. And she would find ways to go from little ledge to little ledge, and she would just commit to things. If it was something that was taller than she would just jump and hope she made it. On the snow and ice, I think that there are a couple of places where instead of going through extremely steep sections, she could maybe switch back over to the edge of, along this ridge, we have a lot of what's called cornices, where the wind blows sideways over the ridge and it creates this little crown of snow. Mm-hmm. And we don't go near that crown because it wouldn't support the weight of a person. But I think in a couple cases here, it would support the weight of a dog. So she could go into some different terrain that we couldn't. And so that's how she would circumvent some of the steeper terrain. And some of it, honestly, I have no clue. You know, I obviously wanted to take good care of her, but there's times where all of my focus is just on getting myself to a certain place and taking care of the client, monitoring the Sherpa. And I'd think like, oh, surely she'll stay here. And I'd work my butt off for 10 minutes to get over something hard. And I'd look down, she'd be standing right next to me. I don't know how she did it, honestly.
It's so amazing. When you're doing this climb, how many clients did you have with you?
Originally, we started off with 6 clients on Barunsi, and all of those clients got to our high camp, which is 21,000 feet. And so there's 6 clients, myself, our dog, and then we had 3 Sherpa up there as well. And when we went up, we had kind of a marginal weather forecast, but traditionally on this mountain, things tend to pass through pretty quickly. And in this case, when we were there, it didn't. We had a windstorm that came in, and we had consistent 40 to 60 mile an hour winds for days while we were up there, which prevent us from climbing. The Sherpa I was with have been doing this for decades. They say they've never seen anything like it. And so we ended up waiting out this storm we're meant to be in high camp for about 6 or 8 hours. We ended up waiting it out for 5 days. And throughout the course of those days, a couple days in, a couple of my clients were like, this isn't for me. I want to go down. And we'd send them down with a Sherpa. And then a day or two later, somebody else would say, I'm tired of being in this tent. This is crazy. I need to go down. And they would go down. And it ended up being one woman from Finland who went up, myself, the Sherpa, and the dog. So we ended up going down to a very small party. But that dog outlasted 5 humans that were safe and sound in tents and negative 40-degree sleeping bags.
Were your clients, were they cool with the dog, or were they like, hey man, can you focus on me so I don't die and forget this mutt?
I worked very hard not to let that happen. We had one gentleman that had an allergy, so I made sure that he was never in a tent that the dog was in.
Yep.
But honestly, I think at least to some degree, every person there absolutely loved that dog. Even our porters and cook staff. An expedition like this takes a huge amount of help from porters and Sherpas. So to support myself and these 7 clients, we had an additional 40-some people that were carrying the equipment, setting up tents, putting up ropes. I mean, those are the real heroes of this style of climbing. There's no way that we could do it without them. But I saw the biggest change from the staff because, like I said, Nepali people in general are kind of range from mild disdain to just like vague tolerance of dogs. And so they went from not very happy to see her to just were in awe of her. They were going to other camps and telling people, you have to come see this dog. You got to see the dog that climbed the mountain. And our cook started making food just for the dog. So their tolerance for the dog just went through the roof. It went from could hardly stand her to absolutely loved her. She really earned her keep there.
So, that's an interesting case study, a little sidebar here, but, you mentioned in Nepal and, the rabies prevalence. And so it's just a safety thing to not be overly friendly with dogs, societally there, dogs pose a different kind of danger than they do to us here. We love our dogs. Yes. They're part of the family. And so they're just, they're being raised to go, hey, that, whatever you think about that can give you this sickness that's going to be real, real bad, could kill you even. And so they're looking at it through that lens. It's hard for us to imagine. And yet you get this special dog who says, you know what, I like this dude. I'm going to climb a mountain with him. And then your support staff and everybody who's with you sees this dog doing something that's not dangerous. It's doing the exact opposite. And they're going, man, I like this thing. Like it's a cool testament to how awesome dogs really are.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Nothing against anybody I worked with or the clients on that climb, but my favorite person on that trip was definitely the dog.
I hear you, man. I like hanging around dogs a lot. So when you're talking elevations of 21,000 feet, 22,000 feet. And anyone who's ever been to Colorado and done a 14er or, has been even above, I live at 800 feet. So when I go elk hunting, it's 9,000, 10,000 feet. And I try to keep myself in good shape. I run a lot, and even it doesn't matter. Like when I get there, I'm like, if I hit 10,000 feet, then it's like, it takes me a day or two where I'm like, I bend over to tie my boots, I stand up and I get lightheaded, like there's nothing you can do about it. And you're talking about doubling that. And you're talking about people who have trained, and you have obviously a ton of experience, and Sherpas, they live there, they do that stuff, they've done it more than anyone. And then you've got clients who you would assume and hope are plunking down all that money and carving that time out of their life, that they're good to go. I'm sure mileage varies on that some, but then you have this dog show up. And this dog, from what I read about it, at points was like running ahead of you and acting just like a dog on a hiking trail, but at, 19, 20, past 20,000 feet, which is so incredible.
It didn't really dawn on me at the time, while it was happening. I can't say that I gave it a whole lot of thought, but then coming home and speaking to more people about it and writing about it, just the physical ability of what this dog was able to do is just absolutely mind blowing. I mean, going over, just snow and rock and things in bear paws alone in those temperatures, I guess, just through breeding, how they're able to get to a point that they can even stand that is amazing. You wouldn't catch me walking up a mountain barefoot. And even small things like how this animal didn't get snow blindness. We're on snow consistently for days and days at a time at extremely high elevation where the UV is as much as 10 times as powerful as it is at sea level. How she was able to see, I just flat out don't understand how she was able to stay warm. I don't know if it's the breed of dog or if this particular animal was just more inclined to be able to handle it. But then, above all, the elevation there, elevation for climbers is the great equalizer. Here in Seattle, if I go to Mount Rainier, 10 to 14,000 feet, I can climb, 2,000 or 3,000 feet up in an hour. On some of these higher peaks, I can only go maybe 200 feet an hour because it's so difficult. And I can't say that I ever saw any sign of fatigue with her whatsoever. When we went up, she would kind of go slow and stay with us. But on the way down from the summit, which is almost 23,500 feet, she would run ahead. And imagine how little oxygen there has to be for you to get out of breath going downhill. I'm like you said, fit person. I'd like to think that I can keep up with about anybody that I need to. But, I'm like going as fast as I can downhill, and this dog's running ahead and then looking over her shoulder all impatient. Why aren't you keeping up? But yeah, what she was able to physically do up there, it blows my mind. I haven't had anybody be able to explain to me really how she could handle those conditions and be able to do what she did. I can't understand it or explain it. She's a special animal.